Whenever
All
you're ready,
right,
Madam Chair.
welcome. This is the regular meeting of the Stable Token Commission for August 29th. If you have boarded the wrong plane, please get off now. I think we will start with a roll call. We have a couple people online and a couple people absent.
Can do, Madam Chairman. Commissioner Meyer?
Here.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Revel?
Here.
Commissioner Pope?
Here.
Commissioner Naves?
Here.
Commissioner Gordon?
Excused?
Chairman Racines?
Here.
Madam Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, I don't think I have any particular comments. We've had a couple very exciting weeks, I think. And with that, I'd say let's go ahead and jump right into the agenda.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll do my quick announcements first. We do have agendas and sign-in sheets outside of the room. If you are here in person, please do fill those out. And I will go ahead and read my now updated disclaimer. Key decisions pertaining to the Wyoming Stable Token Initiative will be made by the commissioners of the Stable Token Commission or the state legislature in public meetings such as this. Further, the only commissioners are those appointed by statute, the governor, or majority vote of the commission. At this time, Wyoming stable tokens, including the Frontier Stable Token issued by the Wyoming Stable Token Commission, are not available for purchase by the public at this time. Smart contracts for the FRNT token have been deployed on mainnet Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, Arbitrum, Base, Optimism, and Polygon blockchains, and contract addresses are published on the Commission's website. As such, any website or platform claiming to sell or distribute Front should be considered fraudulent. Please do not attempt to purchase tokens from unauthorized sources. Information outside of these public meetings should only be considered factual and legitimate if it is distributed through our official channels. At this time, these are limited to our website at stabletoken.wyo.gov, the Wyoming Legislature website at wyoleg.gov, and our social media channels with the @WyoStable username on Twitter, YouTube, GitHub, and Warpcast. With that, Madam Chairman, I can take us through today's agenda, if that is.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I do believe we'll have a bit of a shorter discussion today, although I typically jinx that when I say that out loud. We'll be skipping minutes for this go-round. We'll go right into the monthly budget review for month ending July 31st of 2025. I will go through an industry update. I'll provide a quick status check on the token management rules that were approved at our meeting on August 4th. And then I'll give some details about the front launch and walk through the new website redeployment. We want to make sure that everyone understands where materials have been migrated from our old website to our new website and new web presence. It should be a little more intuitive, but still may help to have a couple of pointers about where to look for the information. After that, we'll have another demo from one of our pilot program partners called Excova. They've built a platform called WyoPay. You could think about that almost like a Venmo for the Wyoming stable token, Front token. And after that, we will review the results of the Q2 2025 blockchain selection exercise. So again, this is a quarterly process. This is month 3 of that quarterly process. We will share those results with the commissioners and look to see if there are any new candidate chains in contention. After that, we'll do a quick review of BFY 27 documents. I think most of the commissioners are aware of this, but this Friday, AKA today, typically we have these things on Thursdays, but today is Friday. So at the end of day today, all of our documentation is due to the state budget department. That includes the budget, that includes the narrative, that includes the strategic plan and the annual report. All those have different form factors. We'll go through those, and then the expectations will have Joe, our CFO, Joe Saldana, take us through some of the information about the financial projections that he's put together. Then we'll talk about a couple of next steps, upcoming meetings, and public comment. Madam Chairman, back to you.
All right, thank you. And now remind me, we don't usually approve the agenda, right? Okay, and absent objection, we will proceed into the monthly budget review as of July 30th.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So as usual, you have 2 bigger pieces of paper in front of you. The one that's a bit more legible is the summary that I create based on the information provided by A&I. So for this month, as usual, the main driver is salaries and benefits. Those have been standardized since January, so no deltas there. For the 200 series, there's about $4,300 charge in July. That is the first chunk of team transport to Jackson for the Wyoming Blockchain Symposium, where we did perform the launch of the Frontier stable token. There's also about $2,500 in July charges for team out-of-state travel. That's actually my travel from May for ETH Dublin and the Avalanche Summit. Those are on a bit of a lag. We do have 60 days to do the repayment, so it fits into the structure, but that one's on a bit of a time lag there. In terms of the 200 series, one of the line items has traditionally been hardware and software. I have updated that to hardware, software, and intangibles, as over the last 2 months, we've captured the work we've done around intellectual property. So in June, we did discuss the filings for the word marks with the US Patent and Trademark Office. So the Frontier stable token, Wyoming stable token, WIST, all those were filed with the USPTO, which comes at a cost. In July, you see that 1771 number. That includes $1,500 of filing fees with the Secretary of State's office for the filings we did for the very same word marks in state rather than with the USPTO, because you need both. Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, we are waiting for some kind of preliminary feedback from the domestic side of things, but then once we have kind of a first blush of what that looks like, we can bring it overseas. Some of these other countries you'd want to file and have reciprocity, essentially.
Right.
So we could cut down fees pretty significantly, as well as timelines, provided we have a little bit of data how things are going to work domestically.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on from that, there is a telecom charge, a bit of a blip from the 250 that we usually see. These are again on a bit of a lag. There was charges incurred for international travel. Our CFO, Joe Saldana, CISO Keith Lawhorn were at Consensus in Toronto. I do believe there was a global charge applied there. And to be clear, we are still fighting the June charge where I was abroad in Europe and an international plan was applied to my phone that was for Mexico and Canada. So we're still fighting the fight on that one because I think there's about $1,200 in there that we shouldn't be responsible for. You know, there's a bit of a gap in July for vendor payments, just a quirk of the invoices coming in the 45-day repayment cycle. As a result of July being nil, we'd expect some larger charges in the month of August for July and August, including with Paul Hastings, which we rely on for some additional legal advisement. We do expect the majority of our work with Fireblocks to be covered with an August payment, as well as 2 monthly charges for Inca Digital, which is providing open source intelligence. So with all of that said, to kind of give the round numbers at the end of the exercise here, our biennial fiscal year 25 commission expenses to date, so covering from July 1st of 2025 through June 30th of 2026, of the $5.8 million this commission has been appropriated, we've only spent $1.158 million so far, or about just under 20% of the total budget. Now, again, that will spike a bit in the next couple of months as vendors continue to come online and deliver work, but we are still looking to be good fiscal stewards here, and I think the numbers reflect that. We still have about $4.641 million left for the remainder of BFY 25, or roughly 80% of the budget for 11 months of a 24-month biennium.
As I recall, ETS was responsible for getting that service on the cell phones.
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, that would be correct.
Yeah. Again, do we have direct access to actually, making sure we're getting what we want, or is it still going to have to go through that process?
We have access. There's a little bit of a roundabout because the telecom process will ultimately handled by ETS does come through A&I for the payments. So it's kind of working our way through that process,
Okay,
kind of
so
digging through a
nothing
couple
direct,
layers.
You gotta go through, basically, get on 2 horses on the merry-go-round before it comes back to you.
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, that sounds about right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the budget?
What do you think, the attorney services, do you think that's gonna be fairly constant in July, about the same as June, or more or less, because of the things that we're doing?
So through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, again, this is, if you look at the numbers for April, May, and what we're expecting in the next month, I think we're going to be consistent around that level. In June, we obviously had a spike because there was quite a push in that period of time to get significant amounts of policy documents done. You know, the rules for reserves and the token treatment, the user agreement, risk disclosures. So I'd expect that to be a one-time spike. Now, there may be other kind of peaks and troughs. I could see things being maybe a little relaxed for the immediate future, but as we do a bit more work on, let's say, internal controls, as we start doing transaction monitoring, needing to understand how things are going, there could be, again, some spikes here and there, but generally speaking, we're coming in under budget.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about the budget report? Okay, moving on to industry update.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I think we'll keep it predominantly in the US realm for this go around, but first, our update on market cap. So we are still operating at all-time highs of stablecoin market cap. Now we are around $270 billion, up about $99 billion or 58% from the market cap this time last year. Stablecoins, as of the last 30 days, have been responsible for $3.59 trillion in transaction volume. So again, I will note that that is beginning to eclipse, you know, Visa and MasterCard in aggregate at this point. From a domestic perspective, at the end of June, I don't know if we, I think it may have been a little later than the end of June, I don't know if we covered this last meeting, but the White House did put out a report called Strengthening American Leadership in Digital Financial Technology. That was one of the resultant products of Trump's executive order from very early on to his presidency about strengthening America through digital assets, including stablecoins. While that report is fairly comprehensive in what it covers as kind of a status update across multiple agencies, the SEC, the CFTC, OCC, and the Fed, a lot of the, and this is my own personal perspective on it, a lot of the actions resolve to, you know, further study or recommendations that are now being thrust onto the different regulatory bodies. Somewhat similar in that capacity to the Genius Act, where now that the Genius Act has passed, the SEC, CFTC will be responsible for their rulemaking, and there's kind of a longer tail on that. I think one of the things we could do, perhaps now that we have the new website up and running, is start hosting some of these documents on the website just as reference material. That could potentially be helpful. So I'm going to flag that for myself, and I'm thinking out loud. But that is a fairly robust report. And I would open it up to any of the commissioners or other members of the agency through the chair that may want to speak on that, because I know it's something we did go through with the Paul Hastings team in a bit of detail. Okay. If there are no comments, I will continue. Second thing I wanted to note is that yesterday, the Department of Commerce began posting quarterly gross domestic product results to the blockchain. So this seems to be an effort to keep historical data in an immutable ledger. So they're doing this in conjunction with multiple exchanges, including Kraken, who we expect to work with it when we launch the Wyoming stable token. And they're also on multiple chains. So they're posting this data to Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Tron, Stellar, Avalanche, Arbitrum, Polygon, and Optimism. So of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we're already deployed on 6 of them. And then one of them is also another one of our candidate blockchains. So I think we're in good company there. And we'll see if more agencies start posting their data on these types of ledgers in the near future. And then the SEC launched what they call Project Crypto. The obvious kind of remit there is to clarify some of the guidelines around securities, commodities, stablecoins. one of the interesting takes was that they are proposing allowing platforms to trade both security tokens and non-security tokens in one exchange. So we'll see how that works out. And then in line with commentary we'd heard from Commissioner Hester Peirce in the past, looking to do things like innovation exceptions, what I would call a regulatory sandbox, and bring those to fruition. And that's what I had for the domestic side of things. Any questions on any of those updates or anything that I missed from other commissioners or team members?
Any comments, questions?
I guess a little in the stable token industry update. What's the non-governmental organizations? What's that amount of money that they distribute, I guess on an annual basis through the world?
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, that's a great question. If I had a historical number, when I'm not sure I do, it would likely be wrong now because as USAID is no longer operating within the US. We're certainly aware of other non-governmental agencies that do large amounts of aid distribution, but I don't have that number for you at the top of my head.
Yeah, I think that up in Jackson, there was one that was the humanities or something, had 400 billion a year, and that the rule of thumb was, 2 trillion plus. So, yeah, I was just trying to get some cooperation on those numbers as far as that. I know it's a lot. I just don't know how much it is.
Yeah, through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, and I appreciate you bringing that up. One of the things I think we'll talk about a little bit more when we talk about the launch is, our positioning. We've got a lot of interest now from public entities, NGOs about using something like a frontier stable token to do aid distribution. In the wake of USAID being dismantled, we found that about 80% of every dollar was evaporating on the way to be delivered to the ultimate recipient. Now we have functionally built a technology that could be distributed directly to that recipient. So there's a lot of interest in what we've created here. And I think when people bring up feedback about a frontier stable token or the Wyoming stable token being in competition with incumbent or private business, it would seem to me that we could probably operate just in the realm of public interest and stay there, and that would be, we do quite well there.
So only a 20% efficiency of distribution?
The USAID, the numbers that I'm aware of, said that 88% of every dollar intended for aid was being essentially withdrawn by intermediaries before the aid money got to the ultimate recipient.
Wow. In a stable token, you could probably be 99.9% and give them a 1% of our treasury yields for their admin. Yeah.
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay, thank you.
There is a comment, Madam Chairman, from Commissioner Pope.
Go ahead, Commissioner Pope.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Director Apollo and Commissioner Meyer. That the other thing about it is that there is traceability. There's a tremendous amount of ability to see exactly how and where the funds are going if the stable token is used. And that is one of the things I would love to see the state adopt is vendor payments and social services payments via the stable token as well. So that's my that's my only added comment to what Commissioner Meyer was discussing.
Anything else? Okay, just a couple other things worth mentioning in terms of different issuers and incumbents. Circle did announce that they are building a blockchain called ARC, which will be purpose-built for stablecoin finance. Hopefully we'll learn more about that in the future. And they're not the only ones. Google and others have also announced that they will be launching their own purpose-built blockchains. Now, how all those will work, which ones will come to fruition, Whether they'll be public, permissionless, or private and kind of walled garden, yet to see. Obviously, a large benefit of this technology is the potential interoperability. And, we've netted out quite well with Layer 0 as a partner, already being on 7 compatible and interoperable blockchains out the gate. The hope would be if there are more and more chains, we'd be ready for them when they do get launched. Any other questions on the news for this month or anything that anyone wanted to bring up that perhaps I missed? Okay. Happy to keep moving on, Madam Chairman. So next on the list is the token management rules. This will be a quick verbal update. So last time we met, we had a discussion around the token management rules. The commission did approve the draft of those rules for both emergency rulemaking and regular rulemaking to occur in parallel. Those were packaged up because there's quite a bit of just formalities and format that goes behind it. I spoke with a representative in the Attorney General's office to clear all of those documents. And then the packages have been submitted to our liaison in the governor's office for her review. And provided that all looks good, then those will go to the governor for his permission to proceed. For the emergency rules, obviously that would be looking to go into effect sooner rather than later. The caveat that we'd only be covered for 120 days under token management rules. And then for the regular rulemaking, we would go through the process with the Secretary of State's office, providing their approval, going to the Legislative Services Office, and then going to Management Council before their ultimate determination by the governor. Any questions on the token management rules? Okay. Couple things I will note about our launch of the Frontier stable token. We have done a little bit of a rename and a rebrand. You'll probably hear me still referring to the Wyoming stable token from time to time. That is about 2 years of momentum speaking. And I could also probably make the argument that a Wyoming stable token is now a class of stable token, if you were to read our statute that way, provided you have a certain structure, you have your reserves in the state of Wyoming or managed by the state of Wyoming, you would be a Wyoming stable token. The Frontier is just the first one that we are issuing. It's possible that a yield-bearing stable token would be a Wyoming stable token. It's possible that if other states are interested in working with us to issue their state-branded stable token, but have us provide infrastructure for it, provided, again, it had all the characteristics of a Wyoming stable token, there could be many Wyoming stable tokens. And that's some of the very intriguing feedback we picked up in Jackson last week. I do want to be clear, the launch was technical. We did deploy the Frontier stable token smart contract on 7 different interoperable blockchains. Again, those are Avalanche, Ethereum, Solana, Optimism, Arbitrum, Polygon, and Base. There was pretty significant testing for wallet-to-wallet transfers, cross-chain transfers, all of the functions we would ever need to invoke that are part of those tokens in the smart contracts. So the ability to freeze, seize, pause, mint, burn. Again, hopefully a lot of those we don't have to use, but we also need to make sure they work. So there was testing of those. And we've also published those smart contract addresses to our website. So again, everything we do is in the open. There's people who are already on social media looking at all of the functions we've called and doing analyses of it, which is quite an interesting place to be. But I do want to be specific. That is predominantly a technical launch. In terms of having these tokens available to the public, which they are not at this time, the goal is to have that ready to go and all of our partners lined up for our next commission meeting on the 18th of September. There are a couple of hurdles that we've hit along the way, pertaining mostly to the traditional finance side of things. But that being said, we are working towards remediation of those by end of week next week. We provided some strict deadlines for remediation. Looks like we'll beat those deadlines by about a week. And if that is the case, we will be on the move to turning the rails on September 18th during our commission meeting.
I'd like to have maybe some in-depth discussion, or maybe even have it on the agenda the next time, so we can look at making sure we don't do a stable token what happened to our LLCs. which essentially give the LLCs that was one of those things that's really has plagued Wyoming's innovation for years, is us not getting the market share. And what I'd like to look at is as these other states are trying to clone us and everything that we're doing, it's it's going to take them some time to do it. But I'd rather, and I think you mentioned a white label. From my perspective, it's whether it's a franchise or whether it's an operational agreement where there's a sharing of the income source for it. But we have to make sure that we don't get into an SEC oversight when we do those type of things. So that's something that we might be able to approach with our council, as far as how do we do this without getting into the SEC, but give the states that want to be able to use it, in their area of the country, and then be able to, when we talk to states, be able to actually know what we can and can't say as far as what would be possible. Because I'd love to market this thing at the SFOF or whatever, but I don't want to open my mouth and get my foot in it, so to speak. So but trying to get those things. I think when is it? October is that meeting? I think it is sometime in October, the next one. So it'd be nice to have it by the kind of the rules necessarily not set, but fleshed out to where we know that where they'd be going.
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, I think that's a very astute point. There's been, since we had our announcement, quite a rapid acceleration in the space. I'm not going to say we're the cause of all of it, although I could make that argument if you asked me to. We've seen a couple of states start to be a bit louder about what they may be building in-house. I've held for a long time that we were really the only state working on it. I do think that's true. But now Texas is we're hearing rumblings of Texas doing a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin rather than a gold-backed one we'd heard about before. We're now hearing about Nebraska working with a blockchain called Telcoin, with the fairly interesting, I think, trust structure, like a state-owned trust structure for the purposes of issuing a stable token. So I would need to dig more into those, but for all of those states looking to do their own thing, we've had a couple of states speak with us along the way, representatives expressing soft interest in some kind of collaboration. That is firming up quite rapidly. There's been a couple discussions even since last week about how we would even just technically accomplish it. And we think we're actually pretty comfortable with the technical piece, which is step one. But that means now we need to get into the much more robust and complex discussion with our own statute for the Stable Token Act, our own state laws, interstate commerce, where we do and don't have exceptions, where the state on the other side may or may not have their own restrictions or exceptions. So it's very exciting stuff. I do expect to have perhaps one or more of these conversations in DC on September 10th. I'll be at the CoinDesk policy event. And I know that there's a few representatives there from different states who are interested in proceeding with this conversation. So I think it's the point is well taken that we should try to strike while the iron's hot, of course, keeping our compliance levels where they need to be.
Yeah, if we can get them on board with an organization of, several states, and then at the same time do some uniform laws that might end up in the UCC, so the federal government can't claw this thing back at some point in time. There's just we're going to be running with it, but actually solidifying it and making sure that the future can't be grasped away from us by other circumstances.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, Commissioner Meyer. Madam Chairman, I would note that Commissioner Naves has had her hand up for a moment.
Go ahead, Commissioner Navis.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you, Anthony. It was mostly to, as it relates to the last pending vendor that we have that is delaying some of the public launch, I would say, I guess that's the word to use, of the token, the ability to be purchased. I think that's a better word to use. I would recommend that we consider that the executive team considers a few options, B and C or something like that, to the potential vendor not being able to meet its requirements as described in RFP, as well as through the implementation process. So if the executive team could present to the commission either before the next meeting or at the next meeting, other options for us to consider in identifying potentially a different vendor or a different technical solution to be able to implement so that purchase can be done expeditiously.
So through the chair, Commissioner Naves, thank you. We've got a plan B and a plan C kind of in both of our back pockets. I would think that if we are not able to achieve what we're looking to do by the date we've given that vendor, which is the week before our next commission meeting, I would either say, yes, let's have an executive session during the meeting on the 18th, or even before that. I could see a rationale to do that.
Thank you. And just a follow up here, Chris, I apologize, Anthony, because you know, the vendor has been working alongside us through this entire process, understanding the timelines. And we do know that there are a few things that are outside that vendor's control that are potentially limiting the ability to scale to what was planned and desired. And the vendor has given us different timelines that they have not been able to meet on securing that additional clarity that they needed. So is ensuring that we are speaking with them. I believe the executive team is meeting with this vendor potentially later today, getting further clarity on that, and so that we actually understand what is ahead of us. Being subject to a third party's regulatory approval may prove challenging to the commission to proceed, and I just want to make sure that the state is taking steps to fully implement the Wyoming stable token and ensure that it can be launched as anticipated. These vendors were made aware, as we all know, through the RFP process, that one of the conditions was that regulatory approval by a third-party agency would not be required. And I would just want to make sure that we are continuing to move along, and plans B and C are triggered as required to ensure that our timeline is not delayed. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and to Commissioner, Madam Chairman, and to Commissioners, you know, point, I think that it would be appropriate, irregardless of whether we get that third-party compliance, is to go ahead and work within the state to make sure that we have you know, something within the state that's totally under our control. So that's you know, probably take a little bit of work, but we might as well buy our insurance policy when we can get it.
So through the chair, thank both commissioners for the feedback. Commissioner Naves, I can assure you our team is in touch with the vendor literally on a day-to-day basis. We've got the formal conversation coming up this afternoon, but we are talking to them every day. And Commissioner Meyer, well said, well understood. And again, happy to take that on. You know, there are some just kind of growing pains as we get out the door here, but scalability is a whole different beast. And I think different venues will open up for us as we move.
Yeah, okay, perfect.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. If none, I will just quickly go ahead and share my screen. I would like to take a quick spin through the website just so those who are visiting know where all the documents are. We'll just keep this super brief. So whenever that decides to show up. There we go. So this is our landing page, again, noting that front is not currently available for purchase. We've got a couple of notes about what it is that the Frontier Stable Token accomplishes. We've got links to the select committee and legislature, so people need to find legislative documents, those are there. And if people want to sign up for email updates, there is a notification list at the bottom. I'm going to skip over things like our history, press, and media. What I do want to note is that we have in our, where'd it go? The front token page, About Front. I believe this is where we have the links to all of the contracts for the Frontier stable token. So if you wanted to see what that looked like on Arbitrum, you would simply click that link. You would go to contract and you would see all of our open source code where that's decompiled, right? So this is how the public can audit us anytime in real time, which is exactly what we intended. And then I'll quickly note that from a legal compliance perspective, all of our policies are uploaded, our rules are uploaded. So for example, you can see all of our reserves management rules are here. So it should be hopefully a little easier to find. And then we have a resources tab. We have an FAQ and a glossary. So there's questions about, what is a blockchain? What is a digital asset? That is all there. And then meeting materials is where we have now brought some of this hopefully a bit more to the surface. We understand that these were a bit buried in the last version of the website, but if you were to look at any given meeting date, you'd be able to find the public notice, agenda, minutes, budget summaries, recordings, any kind of additional materials there were. So I think one of the things, this is new. And then of course, if you wanted to find just the public notices, those are in a tab, just agendas, just recordings, those are all in their own tabs. So this is hopefully a lot more streamlined for people looking for our information. And if there are any questions, please do feel free to reach out if you can't find something. There are a few things we do know we still need to port in that are a bit broader. It's not just a document. The blockchain selection exercise, the RFQ and RFP portals, the extent that information was shared for those, we want to bring those in just to have everything in one place. And we're working on that, but for right now, all of the meeting materials that we as a commission generate are there. I will shut this down. Any questions on the website? Okay, well, if that is it, I'm gonna take a little bit of a breather here, and it's my great pleasure to introduce the team from Excova. We have them both on, Candace Jarrett and Chris Fusilio. Just to give some quick intros. So Chris Fusilio has spent 20 years as entrepreneur and solutions architect. He has delivered systems for leading casinos and hospitality brands, processing tens of millions of dollars in monthly transactions, both the US and overseas. Candace Jarrett has been a business owner for 20 years, operating in both B2B and B2C industries, including founding her own marketing agency. Candace has spent her career bootstrapping ideas into real businesses with a creative eye for both distribution and user behavior. And prior to Excova, the pair had co-founded a blockchain development agency. So I will turn it over to their team in a second for the demonstration of their WyoPay platform. But just to quickly frame things, the way I'd like to think about this demo you're about to see is when I first showed you the stable token demo, it was wallet to wallet. It was all self-custody. You need to have a digital wallet. You need to have your seed phrase. There's some complications there. Things get a little more complicated when I went and did a cross-chain transaction where I need to have two wallet addresses or one wallet address that's operational across two chains. Lots of moving pieces. What the teams in our pilot program are really helping us do is demonstrate how the complicated blockchain pieces can get put in the background, and you can use these platforms as you would a normal payment application. So with that, Chris and Candace, I will leave it to you if you want to say a few more words about yourselves and or WyoPay, and then I will let you take it away with the demo. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Madam Chairman, Commissioners, Executive Director Apollo. Thank you all so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here today. My name is Candace Jarrett. I am here today with my co-founder, Chris Fusilio, and together we have created consumer infrastructure that makes blockchain easy for anyone. Our motto is see the benefits, not the blockchain. On the outside, Excova is a service provider that provides white label user interfaces that look and feel like the apps people already use, but works with any token. No wallets, no gas, no friction. Excova makes sending crypto as easy as sending an email, which I'll demonstrate for you in a moment.
Under the hood, Excova runs on blockchain. We use battle-tested blockchain technologies like smart contracts, account abstraction, and gas sponsorship to deliver token-driven white label apps that look and feel like Venmo or PayPal. Which brings us to WildPay. WildPay is the first ever consumer front end for the Frontier token. With WildPay, everyday consumers can immediately start using Frontier token without needing to learn how to crypto. And both consumers and businesses will immediately experience the benefits of using Frontier token over traditional payment rails and processors.
On the Excova system as a whole, we currently have over 2,000 customers beta testing. We opened a public beta for WildPay on Avalanche Fuji Testnet about 2 weeks ago and have a pool of 30 customers who have already signed up to help us test WildPay. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just want to make sure everyone can see that okay?
Looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, so when you log in, all you have to do is put your email address in. That's it. There's nothing to download. There's no browser extension, nothing. You just go to, well, right now, beta.wildpay.me, eventually wildpay.me, and you will just put your email address in. So I just put in an email address, and it's going to send me a code. So I go over to my email, I wait for the code to come in. Here it is. And then I copy the code and I go ahead, put it in here and verify the code. And then it will bring me right to my WildPay dashboard. Now from here, we can see a bunch of things. We can see my transaction history, but just say I want to go ahead and I want to send somebody Frontier token. I click the pay button and I go ahead and I put in their email address. So I'll just put in an email. And I'm going to send them one Frontier token. And at the top, notice we see the balance is 2072 Frontier token. I'm going to put in one and send it. And I just want to note that this transaction is completely gasless. So when I send one Frontier token arrives. And it won't be deducted from my account or from the recipient's account. It is completely gasless. So click OK, and see up here, we see 1972. Now, I've done this whole thing as a consumer without seeing any blockchain at all. It just looks like a regular fintech app that you would use. It's extremely easy. But if I want to confirm that this transaction did happen on the blockchain, I just go back to my I go back to my system and I see that this is the transaction and I can view it right on the Block Explorer. So I see that I sent one Frontier token right there. Okay, now just say I want to request. So requesting is very easy. It works the same as the other flow. You go ahead and you put in one Frontier token or however, I'm not sure if I want to request 5. And then, oh, actually, sorry, I can't because this is for the purposes of this beta. We actually limited it to 1 or less, but eventually you'll be able to request however much you want. So, and then I go ahead and click request by email and I could put an email address in right here and just request it. However, just say I didn't want to request via email. I want to do it instead by a QR code. This is very useful for businesses that have point of sale systems. So you can generate a QR code and then anybody can scan it. So just say the customer shops as normal, they pick out what they want, and then there's a tally of how much it's going to be. They can go ahead and tally it up, and then have the customer go ahead and scan the QR code. So I just want to go through here and mention how you get funds into the system. You just go to the home page and then you click deposit, and this would be where your on-ramps would be. So right now we're having people use our testnet faucet. So when people go to use the public beta, they just come in here and just top up right from the faucet. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Chris to go through the App Store.
So you can think of the App Store as serving 2 functions. First, it's a place where consumers can discover all of the places they can use Frontier token. We envision people being able to pay for things like taxes, tuition, and even tickets for events like the Cheyenne Frontier Days with Frontier Token. Our app architecture makes that easy. Existing systems can either install our plugins or use the Excova software development kit. Second, we encourage businesses and developers to build with Frontier Token within WildPay. By integrating apps, games, DeFi, etc., WildPay rolls out the red carpet for Frontier Token developers to reach high levels of consumer adoption. For example, organizations like NGOs can use WildPay SDKs to pay thousands of recipients instantly and directly, even if they do not have a WildPay account yet. Now I'll turn it back over to Candice to walk you through how existing e-commerce websites can use WildPay to accept Frontier Token.
Okay, so in this section of WildPay, when you click shop at the bottom, you will see a bunch of featured e-commerce stores that have integrated WildPay. The benefit for businesses to use the Frontier Token is that with WildPay, they can save up to 80% on payment processing fees and settle transactions instantly. This is a demo store here that operates completely separately from the Excova WildPay system. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. There are currently 10.5 million e-commerce stores using Shopify or WooCommerce. And with our plugins, these stores can accept Frontier Token with just a few clicks. So right now, this demo store that you're seeing operates on WooCommerce. So I would you don't see any blockchain here. It looks just like a normal store. It is a normal store. So just say I want to go ahead and I want to buy a tent. I'll add that to my cart. And then just say I want a backpack to go with my tent. Go ahead and add that to the cart. Go to checkout. And so right here, it's just a normal checkout flow. And then at the bottom, you'll see that you would see your payment options. So you could pay with WildPay, Apple Pay, or PayPal. We select WildPay and place order. And now it just pops up this payment modal. I see that I have 19 and 72 Frontier Token. I want it to come from my balance. I'm going to go ahead and click. It's 12 cents it's going to deduct. So I'm going to go ahead and click Pay Now. Send the payment to the Jackson Outpost demo store. And this transaction here is also gasless. So payment is successfully. And now it's going to bring me back to the store's the order complete page so I can see the process. And I've also received an email to let me know that I have this order come through. But just say that I am interested in seeing this on the blockchain. I want to see that I've paid the Jackson Outpost 12 cents. So I go back to WildPay and I can see right here to the Jackson Outpost, I paid 0.12 Frontier. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And now I can also see this on the Block Explorer. So we can see that this was a blockchain transaction, even though the entire process looked just like a regular payment application. So that concludes our demo for WildPay. Again, we really appreciate your time having us here today. We would like to invite anybody, Madam Chairman, the commissioners, and anybody in the public to try out WildPay. We do have a public beta on Avalanche Fuji Testnet right now that people can try at beta.wildpay.me. I would like to note here that banks are not open on Labor Day, but WildPay absolutely is, so you can use it anytime. So Chris and I have a previous engagement, won't be able to stay for the remainder of the session, but we do welcome public questions and feedback. Actually, I want to show right here in WildPay, there's a button at the bottom that says give feedback. And so if someone is using the app and has trouble with anything, they can do that. But if they have broader questions about WildPay, Executive Director Apollo has been kind enough to agree to route them through us, anything non-technical. So we really appreciate that. And in the meantime, we'd be happy to answer any questions from Madam Chairman or the commissioners if you have any at this time.
Thank you. Any questions for Excova? Go ahead.
What's your business plan as far as how do you make money on this yourselves?
That's a great question. So from a service provider's standpoint, we are running WildPay as our own product, and typically that would be ran by a customer. But we're running it as one of our pilot products. So that means that we are essentially, under normal circumstances, we would charge a monthly fee for a token to use the product. But there's other streams of revenue as well. The e-commerce system itself, all transactions have a fee mechanism. So typically what you'd see when you pay with Stripe or PayPal, you're paying around 3% plus a few cents per transaction. Our fee is 0.5%, and we can fluctuate that based on market conditions. That also includes all e-commerce that's done through the App Store as well.
Yeah, and that's about what I was thinking, is that where Visa, MasterCard is 2 or 3%, you guys are doing it all in for 0.5%, basically.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the folks from Excova?
Madam Chairman, I have a quick one.
Go for it.
Recognizing that we went through the flow with emails and QR codes, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris or Candace, but I do believe that text messaging, including over encrypted text like Signal, also works with WildPay?
That's correct. When we move WildPay to production, you'll be able to log in and send payments via text message. Also, the 2FA component will be enabled, where users can actually receive a secondary code via text message to double secure their account. And when you're sending payments or requesting payments, specifically with requesting, you will be able to request payments through Signal, Telegram, and apps of that nature as well, which are fully encrypted.
Madam Chairman.
Go ahead.
So, somebody that is at a craft fair or something like that, a lot of times they'll use Square or some other thing. So they just download the app on their phone and essentially just when somebody's trying to buy something at their little stand, what does that process look like?
So the vendor themselves would essentially use the request flow. They would enter the amount that they want the consumer to purchase, and they would click QR code. And then the person that's purchasing the item would scan the QR code with their phone. It would bring them directly and log them in. So they would enter their email address, and they would get the code in their email. They would log in. If they never had an account before, that would be a very simple onboarding process: first name, last name, whatnot. If they had an account, then they could immediately pay with their balance, or take the funds from an on or off ramp, from an on ramp that's automatically included as part of that flow. So when Candace showed the payment to the Jackson Outpost, she paid from her balance, but underneath that drop down was also the option to pay. If you had a zero balance, you could pay from any of the available on ramps that are there.
Okay, and so at the end of the month, at the end of the month, the consumer could, maybe they went to 4 craft fairs that month, and a yard sale or whatever, they could pull up your app, and would those transactions be available so they know what their where their money went and what they spent it for?
Yes, absolutely. So the consumers will be able to export their transactions and send them to their accountant, for instance, for tax purposes or whatnot. Businesses will also be able to see all the transactions. Business accounts are held in a separate wallet for the business, so that way everything is isolated for tax purposes and for reporting purposes. Businesses will also have an analytics suite to see exactly, what their revenue had been.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
I have a question. Yeah, thank you, Anthony. I'm sorry, don't know if you guys saw my hand up. Have you guys considered an option for tap to pay? And the reason why I say that is we have, some Wyomingites do not have access to smartphones. They may have a flip phone and they carry their wallet with credit cards or potentially Wyoming stable token cards in it. Would they be able to tap their rain card and make a payment? Let's say that the stand owner has a smartphone, the purchaser doesn't. Would they be able to pay with that?
Yes, so we actually spoke with Rain when we were at the symposium last week, and I had presented the question of how can we make it easy for consumers to be able to use their balance in WildPay in conjunction with the card, and we're working through that technical discussion at the moment.
Excellent, thank you.
Madam Chairman, I think we can wind this one down. Chris and Candace, thank you for your time, the effort that's gone into the app. It's fantastic to see that there is early interest in the Frontier Stable Token with Wyoming domiciled companies. And I know you have to hop to the next one, but as Chris stated, I am more than happy to field any questions over to the Excova team on their platform generally, WyoPay specifically, the pilot, or anything else that comes our way. So I'll be the conduit for that while they need to hop. So thank you again for your time this morning, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Have a great day.
Okay.
All right, moving on.
Moving on, Madam Chairman. Next up is our blockchain selection exercise for Q2 of 2025. So again, this is one where we've now kind of templatized and standardized this process every quarter. We were doing this even without the procurement rules mandating that we do it. Now that the procurement rules have been fully promulgated, we will continue to do it. Next, now we have to. But we do it every quarter. And just to provide some background, again, we'll fly through the first part of this because it's all kind of copy and paste from previous versions. But we do have a remit from the Select Committee on Blockchain, Financial Innovation, and Digital Innovation Technology to adopt a multi-chain and technology neutral approach. Everyone is well versed in the initial blockchain selection working group that we did in September of last year, assessing 28 blockchains, 25 criterias, and the initial candidate blockchains that were resultant of that. Since then, we have kind of kept this rolling process going. Every quarter, the first month of the quarter, we spend some time doing a review of the criteria and potentially updating those. This go around in Q2 of 2025, we did update our criteria for vendor support to include networks that will be supported within the next 2 quarters from those who we've engaged with along the way. Second month is what we call the preliminary assessment. We do some outreach to first-party resources within blockchain foundations, developer teams, people who are close to the actual build-out of these different platforms, and retrieve data from them. And then in month 3, we look at the data they provided. There's conversations to be had if we have questions on the data they provided, if there's kind of back and forth and a dialogue, then that's where we net out in month 3. So again, in month 1, we had that small but impactful, bless you, criteria update. I will quickly confirm without getting into the specificities of candidate blockchain roadmaps nor the roadmaps of our existing partners. We do expect a number of candidate blockchains that have not been onboarded yet to be onboarded in the next few months, which is exciting. During the second month, our preliminary assessment, Steph reached out to 55 individuals across 21 blockchain networks to collect first-party information, including several new ones. I do believe only 2 submissions were received from networks. I will specify that what we provide to these first-party representatives of these different blockchain networks is not necessarily a blank form. It's the information we've already gone through, got feedback from them, independently validated it or questioned it, and it's a dialogue of, is this, is there any material updates to this? So all I have to say is 2 updates sound small, but it may just mean that everything is status quo for some of these other providers and networks that we've talked to previously. So those assessments, those responses came back. We indicated that 1 respondent network did pass the binary criteria, inclusive vendor support. The second submission did not pass binary criteria at this time, I believe, because they did not have the vendor support. So now coming into month 3, which is our final determination, we had some back and forth with the different networks. We did find that 2 of them passed the binary criteria. However, we wanted to look at scores a bit more granularly this time. So in the past, we've said, these networks have hit a certain bar. We think we should, kind of bring them into the fold as candidate blockchains, candidate networks. One of the things that occurred during the last selection process is networks that were brought into candidacy in Q1 were kind of being reported on as scoring higher than networks that were scored in Q4, not recognizing they're two separate set of criteria, because we added a couple of things in Q1. We added a couple of criteria around, have they adopted emerging trends in technology? So there's a couple extra points to score, and people started comparing not apples to oranges, but oranges to tangerines. And to cut that down, what our team would like to propose, at least for this go around and perhaps going forward, is that when we're assessing these networks on a quarterly basis, any chain that passes through the binaries and gets scored should have to receive a minimum of 50% of the available points to be a candidate blockchain. And as a result of that heuristic, for this quarter, we would recommend that the Hedera blockchain, which received 25 points in our metric, which is greater than the 20.5 point kind of 50% average, be brought into candidacy as a Q2 2025 candidate blockchain. Before we make a determination on that, again, I will defer that to the commission, happy to provide any more detail, and you do have all the backing information in front of you. After this, what we would do is notify the first party resources representing any new approved networks that their platform is now considered a candidate blockchain. We would publish all of this to our website. Again, I think maybe we'll just create another tab or widget on the site for all of these as we continue migrating information over. We will queue up in our Q3 2025 conversation. We'll queue up any new criteria. And then again, one of the things we talk about when we get to the month 3 of these quarterly exercises is whether we need to start a parallel process to get what's called UTXO-based blockchains, unspent transactions. Those are blockchains like Bitcoin. They're structured quite differently than blockchains that are account-based, like Ethereum and many of the ones that we're on now. Again, the remit from the select committee is to be technology agnostic. So from my perspective, at some point, we need to get there. Again, we certainly have our hands full with the initial launch, but once the dust has settled on that, I will continue to bring up whether, it's the time to start going down that path. And, I would make the argument once we have a plurality of providers in place and things are flowing, that puts us in a good position to kind of open the funnel up and potentially create a parallel process.
Madam Chairman, I guess because of the volume that's probably going to be in these NGOs, it would be nice, I think, to try to get a feeling about what can be used, outside of the country and necessarily not in the domestic market, if there are blockchains out there, and if we're going to try to cover that to make sure that we at least elevate part of our thought process into making sure we're going to be able to serve that. So, everybody that does get their contributions or whatever from any NGO on a blockchain that we're essentially in that universe.
So through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, I'm just looking to make sure, and a very astute point. I know we have in the third doc you have in front of you, that's the additional benefits, additional concerns. When we talk about use cases and existing partnerships, recognizing that this is just a table that collects the information, doesn't have the actual prompts. These are things like, do you work with local governments? Do you work with municipalities? Do you do, stablecoin transactions on these chains? I think you can make the argument that what you're talking about, kind of this geographic spread, is implicit in there, but I think it's a point well taken going forward to make it explicit and perhaps, talk about and start digging into adoption across different geos, especially now that we have partners like Inca Digital on board with us. We have a lot more intelligence that we can automate rather than us trying to dig for things ourselves. So I think that would be
and if we don't necessarily have that chain, that we've got a Kraken or somebody that can actually make that I guess transfer and switch over at that level. So it's just making sure that if somebody gets a distribution, that they, through our process, that they actually can take it and put it in their wallet or use it in the way intended. I think we're probably with Ethereum and a lot of these were, we got, 90% of the base is probably covered already. But just to make sure that we're 100% is always better than 90. Yeah, thank you.
So just quickly coming back to the blockchain selection exercise, the director's recommendation would be to approve the addition of the Hedera blockchain as a candidate blockchain on which Wyoming stable tokens may be launched in the future. And again, happy to take any questions on that. I've jotted down Treasurer Meyer's note for criteria in our next discussion.
Any further questions on the director's recommendation regarding Hedera? If not, I would entertain a motion.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And again, we will alert the Hedera team once we wrap this discussion. So moving on to the final tranche of documents, these are our BFY 27 documents. Again, to those who joined the call recently, the biennial fiscal year of 2027 begins on July 1st of 2026 and completes on June 30th of 2028. The budgetary documents for that are due today, which means I need to know on August 29th of 2025 how many dollars we need by June 30th of 2028. So.
Yeah. Are we in other business yet, or?
Through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, we can go through the documents for submission and then discuss, and then we kind of open things up. This is the last kind of
Okay, thank you.
structured conversation, and we'll go from there.
Yep.
If that's all right.
Yep, just fine.
Okay, so we've got a couple of things in front of you. Actually, before we even get into that, let me make a quick note. So in terms of what gets submitted, we're responsible for some of it, and other agencies are responsible for other bits and pieces. So what is not in this list is what's called the budget narrative and the exception request. We've provided language to the administration information team for the narrative. They are working, and that A&I team, who we work closely with, is working with the state budget department to put the budget together based on numbers that our CFO, Joseph Saldana, has provided. And we've gone through those with a fine-tooth comb. Those reports, so we've provided it from our side, but we still do not have the final narrative nor budget from my understanding the state budget department yet. So hopefully we will see a copy of that perhaps when we wrap this call. And get back in front of my email, we'll have a copy of that, which then I'm more than happy to, once I review it and approve it, I'm happy to share that on our website. There's, this becomes a public document eventually anyway. So unless commissioners had another idea, I would be happy to share that. And again, we provided all the inputs. We just haven't seen the final version of it, which comes out of a platform called iBars, which we do not participate in. That being said, parts of that narrative are derived from the annual report and the strategic plan. I wanted to quickly go through the annual report because for us, it is a very short document. I've provided you this morning with a June 4th email, again, public document on the State Budget Department website. It is very specific about what is required in an annual report. It's essentially 16 bullet points. And that is the document you have right behind it, which we have provided, as well as an org chart, which for us as a 5-person agency is quite simple. I go through all this context because if you were to look at the website for the State Budget Department where the annual reports are held, some of those are quite lengthy. Some of them have large amounts of historical data. I looked at all of that. I'm noticing we don't have all that data because we're fairly fresh here. spoke with the A&I team, and sentiment was, yes, we can keep this very short and just put all the content into the strategic plan. And that is the next document you have in front of you. This is still in draft mode until we get some of the final numbers in from the state budget department. It is a lengthier doc, kind of functions as a business plan. So wanted to just take you through this quickly. We're not going to go through this in too much depth, but just so you know what's in here, and I think some things will look familiar. I'll just point out where they're drawn from, and then we'll look to kind of clean this up once we get the final numbers from the budget department, and we consolidate that in here, make a couple formatting changes and go from there. Noticing quickly that there are hands up, but those are from attendees, not panelists. I'd like to remind the group and the public that we will have public comment at the end of this discussion. So once we get through the BFY 27 documents and any further discussion after that, we can open things up to the public. So flipping through the strategic plan quickly, we have the agency at a glance that looks very similar to what we have in that annual report I just shared. A letter from the director, which is essentially a roll forward from the presentation I gave to the select committee back in May. Many things have changed since then. The Genius Act has passed. We've launched the Frontier Stable Token, but kept that most of the same to provide context about, at a high level, what's happening with the digital asset industry in the US and how that affects us and how we affect it. Same with the history page. This is just mostly focused on all of the financials of when we've been appropriated money and how much we've spent so far. And then on page 7, there's a quality of life page. One of the requirements of the strategic plan is to address how your given agency promotes and improves the quality of life in the state of Wyoming. There are 10 different results that are sought through this exercise. We've selected 3 of them. That we have a diverse economy that provides a livable income and ensures wage equality. I would make the argument that much of the work the state is doing around digital assets is to diversify the economy. Result 6 is that Wyoming state government is a responsible steward of state assets and effectively responds to the needs of residents and guests. As an agency that spent less than 50% of its appropriation in the last fiscal year and has spent roughly 20% of its allocation for this biennial fiscal year, I would certainly say we're being a responsible steward of state assets. And the final result is that advanced technologies and quality workforce allow Wyoming businesses and communities to adapt and thrive. I think we're seeing that in real time. We saw the ex-COVID demo. We've invited Wyoming domiciled companies into the WIST pilot so they can get hands-on with this technology, and I think we're doing exactly that. Flipping the next page, organizational chart, that's gonna look again quite familiar. Pages 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and the first half of 15 are all of our job roles and responsibilities. We do get a lot done as a 5-person agency, so we've pulled some of that context out of the JCQs and plugged that in here. Second half of page 15, celebrating some of our performance highlights, starting with our accomplishments that cover recruiting, rulemaking, compliance, which is all the other policy docs we've done, blockchain selection like we just went through, and our procurement process, as well as a couple other things. And efficiencies, I did want to call out that our team, particularly staff, has done a fantastic job on automating a lot of our forms through Notion for data collection. We did that for the procurement process. We did it for the blockchain selection exercise. We're using it now for the collection of Know Your Business documents for the licensed service providers we want to onboard as resellers of the Frontier Stable Token and more. And other agencies have adopted some of these forms as well. Moving on to the strategic plan and outlook. This is where we talk more about the industry pertaining to stablecoins and stable tokens, starting with what's going on at the federal level and the sentiment from U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, also addressing some of the industry adoption, noticing that lots of banks are certainly looking to throw their hat in the ring when it comes to stablecoins now that the Genius Act has passed. When we talk about the strategic plan, we've identified a number of organizations we would be targeting as potential users of a Frontier Stable Token to start. And again, I think this goes back to the conversation Commissioner Meyer, you and I were having earlier today, which is that, as we continue having these discussions, as we had the discussions up in Jackson, it really does sound like public interest or public entities are quite interested in doing this, which to me makes a lot of sense. Something that Commissioner Naves has said all along the way is this pie is going to grow substantially. That's what we call out from the Treasury Secretary as well. He's seeing a $3.7 trillion stablecoin industry by 2030. If the pie does grow that much, there's room for a number of players. And if we don't have to take on Circle and Tether, we don't want to take on Circle and Tether, there certainly seems to be enough in the government, public sector, NGO sector for us to work with to keep our hands full for quite some time. That's just based on what we heard in Jackson, to say nothing of what the next couple months will look like. And that's page 18. We also have a couple of performance measures looking to get certain things accomplished by certain dates, like intra-agency adoption. We have been socializing the stable token effort within the state and discussing how it might work with other state agencies. So those will continue and hopefully will be something we can get off the ground in the near future. Of course, repayment of the capital that we've received as part of the general fund is in here. Making deposits to the school foundation fund is in here, and then creating kind of a self-sustaining business, which has always been the plan, to have that done within the next biennium. Moving on to page 20, a couple of metrics in here about stablecoin supply that Joe has pulled down for us. We do some industry analysis on kind of the incumbent stablecoins and what they accomplish, why we and how we are differentiated, including kind of a in-table format comparison of what we can offer versus some of the incumbents or some of the financial institutions that are getting involved. We also have the S&P Global Stablecoin Ratings in here and some of the high-level notes about how they perform their assessment. S&P, this is my own personal opinion, has a very robust way of assessing digital assets, particularly stablecoins. We've talked to some other ratings agencies that have a very traditional lens on what is a net new asset. But S&P is, just speaking from industry experience, seems to be the kind of golden source for that. So we've brought those in too, so we know what we're tagging towards. And then Deb has helped fill out some of the risk factors here: operational risks, cyber attacks, things that could impact our third-party service providers. And then we get into financial considerations. You'll notice on the bottom of page 28, there are a couple of highlights in there. That is, again, because we are waiting on final numbers from the State Budget Department. And then you might have to squint it a little bit, but Joe has provided a number of charts in here pertaining to the revenue projections across bienniums. He's done base, best, and worst case scenarios. There's some notes in here on modeling, more about compliance as a delta from risk. That brings us to control procedures towards the end, around tokenization, financial management, and risk management and governance. And then we also put an appendix in there because, as I think this commission knows well, there's no shortage of jargon and vernacular that gets thrown around in these meetings. So if that ends up being somewhere buried in our strategic plan, or if I start discussing at JAC what a layer 2 blockchain is, there's something we could just point to and make those conversations a little easier. So to be clear, not asking for any approval on this. This is something we're working, again, intra-agency on, but wanted to share that with the commissioners, and we'll share the final documents for the budget and the narrative once I have them and approve them, and those get submitted to the State Budget Department. Happy to open up the conversation, and I'm happy to take any questions on the strategic plan. And then Joe, if we wanted to discuss the projections in a little bit more detail, I'm happy to do that. But I'll pause first and see if there's any questions from the commissioners online around the strategic plan specifically.
Thank you, Anthony. And just so everyone knows, these two documents are laid out in statute and are required to be provided by every agency. So I think Kurt and I are probably familiar with these, but we're not doing this for our health, but it is actually a very good exercise to both celebrate what has been done, but then also we're sort of forced to lay out a plan for the future. And certainly the biggest lift is this year when there hasn't been anything created before. So without any questions from the commissioners regarding the annual report and or strategic plan, which well, I'm assuming will receive their final touches and then be put on the new website when they are
I
complete.
guess
Go
just,
ahead.
just something for maybe to include in next year. And that is, I was watching a special on Cambodia and their problems with actually not regulating, I guess, I'd call them bad actors and severely bad actors because of just the way they're. I'm not sure if there's any countries. I know we're pretty much laissez-faire. It'll go anywhere, but just keep our eyes open about some places that might be, like too hot to handle, because it just seems like their government structure there is they just don't have the capacity to look after and know the people that probably are figuring out some way to make payments in other areas where it's would be problematic, I think, for us to use the token and the capacities that they're the end of the pool they're swimming in, so to speak.
Right, so excellent point. So through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, and Deb and/or Flavia, do feel free to tag in. My response to that would be twofold. First, the kind of binary line in the sand, yes or no, comes down to OFAC, right? There are just certain countries you can't deal with, Cuba and North Korea. I think Cuba. We have adopted the OFAC. So OFAC maintains the sanctioned designated nationals list, the SDN list. They maintain one of those for digital wallets. We have gone through the effort of porting in all of OFAC's wallets to the deny list on the Fireblocks console that we manage, which is just the roundabout way of saying that anyone who's on that list now cannot get Frontier stable tokens. It'll block the send. I'd also add, and Keith, please keep me honest here, I do believe we've created perhaps a more robust list than OFAC maintains. We were going through the OFAC list of designated addresses. We noticed that they maintain it on a per chain basis, but we also know through this cross-chain work we're doing, you can have the same address on multiple chains. So what we found was, let's say the Arbitrum blockchain had 2 wallet addresses on the sanction list, but because that's part of the Ethereum virtual machine, the EVM, it all uses the same shared architecture, we would expect to see those wallet addresses on Ethereum and Base and Polygon on the OFAC list as well. And my understanding is that was not the case. So we've actually gone ahead and created a list where no matter which chain your wallet is sanctioned on, we are covered across all the chains.
Okay, yeah.
And I'll pause there. I want to get to the kind of the geo-specific piece too through risk assessment. But Keith, is that an accurate reflection of what we saw?
That is accurate, yeah. And some are sanctioned down to the asset level, like USDC addresses are on there, which again are Ethereum-based addresses we added to all applicable chains, not just one specific.
Okay, well, it sounds like you guys are going the next step. I guess our other partners, whether they're state or financial institutions, I kind of did the thought of, well, what is going to keep people from going out and having to go through the processes that we did and put 20, 30 vendors on and get all of that infrastructure in. How much would we have to, I guess, share? And I don't know whether or not we could characterize that as a commission expense and not a dividend or an interest payment, but actually a payment that we would pay to whether they're financial institutions or states. And what I kind of came up with was kind of a floating rate thing that it would be like 50% of what we're getting off our treasuries up to 1% after expenses. And to me, I think that would probably get banks, not either banks or financial institutions or states, to say, well, we don't have to spend millions of dollars to get this thing cranked up. And we're going to get a, you know, a gift of this basically for us going out and marketing, or if it gets into our universe, it just is something that happens. And I think that would maybe keep some of the states that aren't very far down the line from actually going down that line and just signing up and doing it.
So through the chair, Commissioner Meyer, I can certainly say that there are a fair number of headaches that come along with trying to get this done.
Oh, yeah.
So every time we run into one of those situations, we do treat it as, if we can solve this, that's just one more reason for other states to kind of partner with us and you know, share architecture, share experience, share documentation, whatever it is. Whether that's an interstate compact, whether that's more of a contractual agreement. I think there's a lot of work to be done on the legal side. Again, the first thing for us is we wanted to just make sure we could technically do it. We've got a pretty good idea of how to do a multi-tenancy issuance through a platform like Fireblocks through multiple workspaces. Of course, it leads to the question of who's controlling what, who hits the buttons. If you look at statute, definitionally, we would have to hold the reserves. There's a
Right.
Wyoming stable token, we have to hold those reserves. So if they wanted to hold their own reserve, that's kind of a break. So there's a lot to figure out there, but I think what you're talking about in terms of kind of like a revenue share model is what we're talking about, some of the market makers and LSPs. We're working closely with the Attorney General's office on that, and I would like to thank Devin personally for his late Friday afternoon conversations over the last couple of weeks as we look at all of this. And then, yeah, so that's well taken. And then Commissioner Meyer, I want to come back to your I think first point, which is about just different jurisdictions, and I'll probably turn that over to Deb and then leave a moment or so for Flavia as well to respond. But just in terms of putting together a risk assessment matrix, you know, we do have in our user agreement, it's any lawful purpose, but lawful means different things in lawful places, right? So making sure that we can keep tabs on what's happening where and just assign different risk profiles. But I will certainly turn that conversation through the chair over to the experts.
Yeah.
Thanks, Director. I defer to Commissioner Naves if she wants to add any thoughts.
Thank you, Deb. I'm also battling through a little cold, so I hope you feel better soon. So Anthony summarized really well, Kurt, the process, what it has been. Advice of the Attorney General's office as well as our outside counsel, Paul Hastings, has been critical to ensure that the build of this process was done in compliance with laws that prevent money laundering and terrorist financing. One of the critical elements of this is the licensed service providers that will be connected to our token. And these providers are themselves subject to regulations to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing. They must comply with the Bank Secrecy Act, either by state regulation or federal regulation themselves. They either may have a charter at the state level or the federal level. And by doing so, they are examined by their own regulators to ensure compliance with that. They also need to be registered with FinCEN to ensure compliance with BSA. So to your question around what would prevent the folks that we're working with from going out there and potentially getting vendors that are not looking as closely to this as we are, or going into countries that are higher risk than we are, I would say that the selection of the licensed service providers will be one where we're going to be screening the ability of these providers to do so. And any of these providers that may have had issues of compliance with the Bank Secrecy Act in the past, that information will be public, and the executive team will be able to make an analysis on whether that licensed service provider has overcome their BSA challenges, or if they have not. And if they haven't, then they're probably not the right partner for the commission. But the partnership with the Attorney General's office as well as our outside counsel has been critical to ensure that we are thinking about all these different pieces and getting the right folks aligned on our end.
I guess I'm really more concerned with getting in the same situation that we had with our LLCs where we are 7 years ahead of Delaware, and the IRS just basically figured out that they weren't going to, actually move forward with the approval of the corporate structure until Delaware and a bunch of other states had already implemented all of our statutes, and then, you know, they were able to just, you know, put a lot of effort into it in the proper manner, which we neglected to do in Wyoming. And they're pulling away billions of dollars, and we're pulling away, you know, 40, 50 million. But from what I can look at as far as a business plan is that if we can figure out a way to partner or franchise and to actually, I guess, maybe stymie the direct competition by other state stable coins, then we're going to have a lot longer runway. We're not going to have all of the market, but I think we do two things. We help out the people in our state. We help out the other states that we're aligned with, and we, in the long run, we solidify, you know, the amount of overall funding that we can get, you know, through this process. So, you know, trying to figure out how to do that and not be under the SEC, you know, but at the same time, as I say, first helping our state financial institutions to the extent that they can compete with JP Morgan or anybody else that's got their coin, because this is, you know, I don't know of any particular bank right now that wants to spend $6 million into getting the stable token business where they could have, you know, essentially 50% of the profits for just signing up and allowing us to have the other 50% of the profits, you know, and that wouldn't, I don't believe that would interfere with, you know, the success of the stable token from our perspective. It would actually enhance it. So anyway, it's the old story is that pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. We don't want to be a hog in this, and I think that we want to be as cooperative as we can, you know, to the states that we align with and other people that we align with. So they don't have to go through 2 years or 3 years of this, and then they're behind the 8 ball, so to speak, as far as actually implementation. So that's what I want to really try to, you know, I guess tee up. And the way we got to do it is the way that Hastings and these people tell us. That's a door we can walk through. So.
I think on the point around the LLC comparison, Kurt, when the LLC were implemented in Wyoming, I think it was in the late 70s, if I'm not mistaken, 1977. The ability to publicize something like that was different than what it is today, right, into 2025. So first to market today is something that people can know a lot faster than they did back in 1977. And there has been a lot of very good publicity around the launch of this token, which Anthony highlighted earlier on some of these efforts that we have encountered. So it appears that the reception has been positive for our token, is widely known. We were not going to be behind Delaware this time around. And I think that the state continues in its leadership effort on this area. Obviously, if the state were to partner with other states to potentially support them in the launch of their own tokens, to the point that Anthony made earlier, we'll have to ensure that the state can do that, that our agency can actually do that, right? Wherever you become the issuer of something on behalf of somebody else, you're carrying that somebody else's assets as your own in your own books, right? And we would need to consult with the Attorney General's office whether this is permitted under the law, that the state can actually do that. But these are conversations to be had. We do know that the state continues to lead on this effort and is widely known by the industry, which was welcomed not only by private entities, but also by other public officials. So I think is a very positive thing. Obviously, we should always be in the lookout for opportunities to increase the outlook for Wyoming and the posture of the state nationwide, but I don't think that we're going to be encountering another LLC issue this time around, Kurt. And maybe it's me being too positive, but I think that we already won that race.
Yeah.
For the stablecoin issuance.
Yeah, I guess the future is so bright we got to wear shades. I just want to make sure that we're going to continue to wear them,
right?
You know, and to pass them out between our friends, because I think that that the market is large enough that we don't have to compete with our local banks. I want to be cooperative with them and give them every opportunity to enjoy this technology. And they've always been partners with the state in so many ways. So I think that it's time for us to step up and do that. And some of the other states that we're aligned with that, I doubt if we're going to do Delaware or Texas, these people are going to roll out and probably get their own tokens. But if we can consolidate market share and drive down the cost of expenses in our financial institutions, as well as have partners in other states to where they've got markets that we can't touch because it's a lot of these markets are going to be geographical, and but when they get to a critical mass 3, 4, 5 years from now, then they can definitely be potential I guess I would say people that could take our market share away, especially in the NGOs, because most of the NGOs are not domiciled in Wyoming. There are a lot of them domiciled back east, Chicago, LA, different areas that if we've got some partnerships in those areas, I think that would be in the long run would be instrumental. You're right, the future's so bright, we got to wear shades now, but let's just keep those sunglasses on for a while. Thank you.
Commissioner Pope, thanks for being so patient.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments on what Commissioner Meyer and Commissioner Navas were discussing, that the goal here is mass adoption of the Wyoming stable token. That is the goal, and there are a lot of ways to achieve that goal. And one of those, if we are dealing with other public entities or other state entities, is to actively seek multi-state compacts, multi-state cooperation, those areas, and I think we actively seek those because when you're talking about the limited liability company battle from 1977 to 1998, the IRS actively tried to bankrupt every limited liability company that they audited, and it was a means. The IRS was the means for the political side to do the same thing that debanking does now, and there are lots of comparisons to the digital asset world and the initial form of the LLC. But what happened is that it achieved enough adoption that the IRS was forced to amend its rules in 1998 to accommodate the LLC structure. And I mean, Wyoming's LLC statute was copied and pasted all over the United States and all over the world with slight amendments. Even little islands in the Caribbean just copied and pasted Wyoming's statute. And so the mass adoption is the goal. You're right, we want to manage that in a way in which Wyoming shares and hopefully dominates that discussion. But it will require actively working with the other states in order to do so, and that requires us first to have the product released and move forward on that front. But I totally agree with you. What we need to do is figure out a way to maintain our advantage in this, and even as the other states come on board and everything, if there's a way for us to co-opt their efforts into our own, then I think we continue to benefit down the road.
And Madam Chairman, I think that the interstate compact is a way that if we get that in the UCC, then it would be almost impossible for the federal government to try to rewind this, or the IRS system to try to rewind it. So those are things that you look at longevity and implementation, and I guess I would say inoculation from unintended consequences of the IRS or federal government or whomever.
All right, thank you. Good discussion.
Yes, thank you for all of the, thank you, Madam Chairman, thank you for all the feedback. One last thing I'd like to do, this might be a little bit free form, is talk about the financial projections. We are at a point now where, we've committed to a budget for the next biennium. Again, we'll be sharing that once it's all consolidated by A&I and the State Budget Department. But Joe has done a tremendous amount of work on projections, scenario modeling, Monte Carlo simulations, and all of that. What I'd like to do is just maybe share my screen and go through some of it live, so Joe could speak to some of what he's using as his variables and reference points. I've given everyone a little excerpt of it because it's, I think, 6 or 8 databases that are all linked together, so that doesn't print nicely to a PDF. But Joe, if it's all right with you, maybe I'll just pull up the revenue tab of the sheet we've been working on. You could just kind of guide me through it, and I'll drive and you can speak. Does that sound about right?
That's perfect.
All right, thank you, Joe. Give me just a second to pull this up. And again, we could talk about how to share this, make it a little bit more legible. But Joe, if this is a good starting point, let me know and I'll let you take it away. Again, just focusing on what some of the inputs have been for the projections and what we have in front of us today.
So what you have in front of you, and first of all, thank you, Anthony, for the kind words, but this has been a team effort. So the collective team has been, thoughts, comments, ideas have been incorporated into this document, as well as the SMAs that participated in our discussions previously. You have a number of, as you look before you, this is the dashboard that runs the models. It has several databases that are attached to it, both external and internal to Excel. You have, as the director mentioned, we do have multiple scenarios, analytical models in the background, and you can make selections on that. You could see, if we look at the center tab, where it's called base case, it's all in green. And if you glance your eyes, you could see the Monte Carlo model selection. So what it's doing is it's pulling historical performance growth numbers from a USDC, and it's analyzing and it's constantly calculating what the growth models numbers were based on historical performance of USDC, and we're pulling those numbers into the model. We have gas fees incorporated in here, and you can make a selection on that. You can see it down at the bottom. It says gas fees, Ethereum. In addition to that, yep, we have buffers. And this is the 2% collateral that we're using. We can alter that if we need to. We do have a modeled mint and burn ratio. And if you glance your eyes down just a little bit, it says annual risk growth. It's a 3.9 right now, and that's based on the Monte Carlo scenario calculations. And then down at the bottom, you could see the minting process. So we've entered what we believe is very conservative numbers in terms of net minting, and that's in column H. And to the right of the screen, Anthony, if you could just move to the right, you have 3 outputs. These are summary dashboards here, letting you know what's going on in each case. So worst, base, and best. The tables down underneath are the NAV calculations, cash flows, and net cash balances for each of the scenarios. And what we're doing here is once the LFA reaches the 2% collateral number, we're able to move money onto our cash flow statement, but we do have an earned revenue numbers. And you could see that on the next tab, if you go to the annual budget projections. So this is just going out, if you go up a little bit, and you could see the summaries going out to 2030, some graphs. I'll stop here for a second. So we are projecting to start earning revenues in 2026 based off the stable token. We do have projections in here for a yield-bearing token that'll happen in the latter part of 2026 as well. And you'll see that in rows 25 through 27. And then the collateral based for just the yield bearing just below it. And then the totals down in the green box down at the bottom. And if you just glance down a little bit to the next table, you can see 2025 projections, and below that, you see the totals. And on the next tab, you can continue going down. Next tab, you have the biennium numbers. This is what you saw in the strategic plan that Anthony showed earlier, going out to 2030. And below that, we have the detail, I think by month is the next one underneath. And you could see when our revenues, we are projecting for the revenues to start appearing. And this is after we fulfill our statutory obligation of the 2% buffer. And the minting that goes on, we're projecting the minting down below in rows 72 to 77. And headcount below that. And then some key metrics and assumptions for public distribution. The next tab is the same information, but probably in a summarized form. Same information, just one tab so that we can use that for our presentations. And the third one is the quarterly. Same information, but on a quarterly basis. I'll stop there. Any questions?
Madam Chair. Yeah, just a question on the interest rate yield shocks.
Yep.
Looks like the worst case scenario has it going down to about 2%. And I know from what I can see on just the printout we got, but I know historically that's probably a worst case scenario, but it hasn't been all that long ago when interest rates were much lower than that. So would we consider a worst case scenario maybe even half of that?
Excellent question. So we have been, as a team, analyzing the yield curve over the last couple of weeks, and there has been material changes to it. And if, Anthony, if you could go to the so far forwards rates tab. Yep. So you go up a little bit. So you could see here, maybe not this one. Go to the next tab, the yellow one that says so far table. Excellent. So column AC is the pure secured overnight funding rate. And you could see that in August of 2025, we're at 4.2%. This is, by the way, this is an external model pulling information from the New York Fed. So this is a live feed as of this morning, I believe. And so you could see if you glance your eyes down to 2026, it drops from 4.28 to 3.04 in November. So we do see the yield curve even dropping below that in 2027. And so this is a discussion that, we've been having internally, because if we're earning, let's say 3%, but we got a buffer of 2%, we only got a 1% number filling the bucket of the buffer. So if we have a lot of net minting going on, it's going to take us a longer period of time to fill the 2% collateral that is required. We're able to shock the yield curve. I mean, we could do it right now. I don't know if Anthony's model will work on his PC, but we're able to shock it and make it go negative, and we could see the impact of that on projections going forward. I don't believe at this point in the capital markets there's been any discussions about negative yield curve in the United States, although that's not a too far-fetched scenario given what's happened over the last decade. So we don't see that as, I mean, that's definitely a tail risk, in my opinion.
If I may, through the chair and to Commissioner Wallace, one of the things that Joe and I speak about, especially after being in Jackson last week, is what's going to happen in March of next year. Chairman Powell has been keeping rates fairly consistent for a while. There's pressure from the administration to drop that. They're talking about to 0.5%, 1%. If that was to happen, again, you'd have a material impact on the spreads that we're talking about here, right? If we need to over collateralize to 2% and rates are below 2%, this becomes very cumbersome very quickly. That's why one of the things I brought up to the select committee during my testimony back in May was not only saying we want a bigger pool of permitted investments because we want it, but creating almost like a decision tree where in certain scenarios we can start moving towards other types of assets that are still fairly conservative but won't have the same downward pressure on them if interest rates drop. So Commissioner Meyer, you and I talked about this, corporate debt, fixed income, things like that for, again, highly secure, but will bear a couple of points over the SOFR rate and would help us kind of substantiate things. But again, the goal for us is always going to be conservatism, but if that puts us below our statutory responsibility, we're at a bit of a impasse there.
Yeah, I would guess as far as interest rates going down, there might be a decision-making process because the Trump boys are in stable token, that it might not go much below maybe 1% below neutral, and what neutral is around, 3.2, 3.3, something like that. And
Right.
so I think if you get down to 2.25, I think that's going to be basically the floor. It's going to cost us 25, 30 basis points to operate. So, essentially you've got basically a couple of percent, and you can live well on a couple of percent if you have there's not much cost associated with that 2% spread, so and even if it got down to it would have to get down basically back down to where it was at 0.17, 0.25 before you'd actually start eating your seed corn, and hopefully the Fed and everybody else understands that that's not a good place to be, because inflation is the ugliest tax that really permeates our economic system, and we just have to be smart enough never to get into that situation again, because sure, you're not paying taxes on Social Security now if you're retired, but if you've got CDs that are bringing in 4.5%, and they get down to where they're 0.5%, then that you got some problems there. So we just got to be a little bit more intelligent about how we use interest rates. I mean, I'm sure you guys remember, some of you, about the Volcker years. people were making 13% mortgage loans. You know, it's a little different now because it moves so fast. People got stuck in these ones and they can't get out of them, you know, and who's going to walk away from a 3.5%, you know, mortgage? They're just not. So, but that's gonna, you know, I think moderate over the course of the next year. We'll be down, you know, yeah, maybe 0.75% or 1% probably by this time next year, I think. And I think that'll probably get us off the edge of the mortgage thing and get us moving in the right direction. So and the economy's not that bad right now, you know, so it's not going to take massive amounts of stimulus. We just got to figure out how to balance our budget. I got a $10 billion Zimbabwe bill in my pocket right now. And they had a $1 trillion Zimbabwe bill printed at one time. So, you know, inflation is the tax that people don't talk about, but that's a huge, huge tax.
Thank you. Commissioner Wallace.
You know, I was just gonna add, if we start, you know, talking about adding corporates and that sort of thing to the collateral, I mean, that's getting pretty close to a bank at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, through the chair, Commissioner Wallace, I would agree. I mean, we're moving away from, I mean, it's not necessarily applicable to us, but we do want to tag pretty closely to the Genius Act, I would think. They do define what a payment stablecoin is there. You know, I think the closer we are to that, the closer we are to maybe perhaps things like tax benefits under the IRS, where stablecoins be treated as cash. So I hear you on that one. Just want to make sure that we're assessing all of our options that are available. And again, that's why I didn't want to just have a discussion, just opening up new buckets for the sake of opening up new buckets. It would be under certain criteria, because thinking about it another way, if we woke up tomorrow, interest rates are negative, and we had, you know, 1 billion Wyoming stable tokens outstanding, reserved with $1 billion behind them, if we're not generating money, it's said to Commissioner Meyer's point, we start, those bibs come from somewhere. What do we do? Start eating into the trust account, right? And now we're our token holders who we're responsible to hold their accounts and trusts. You know, we're going to start zapping that money. So it's a complex question. I think we need to assess all the options. I think we need to be smart about it, not just saying we're going to have other things that we're going to go and buy and put in a portfolio, but under certain scenarios or for certain amounts of time, or only certain amounts or percentages of a portfolio. I think all of that would be up for discussion.
And the spreads are too tight now to actually get into those things. You're not getting paid for the risk. So I don't see us doing that for quite some time. And when you're really kind of managing that, you're looking at if we can actually structure the some of these things in the way that you would use opportunity zones, which could be a 10-year hold, then you could match your treasuries with your duration and pick up something there in that regard. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping we can do is to when we're onshoring these pharmaceuticals, look at using opportunity zones and stable tokens. So you get that extra duration on the stable token in that regard, and actually have other people fund that rather than the federal government, you know, to onshore pharmaceuticals. So there's some different things out there that I think that you can look into, that other structures of government that would support longer duration and slightly longer you know, areas. But right now we're like, what, 90 days or less? I think that's what the statute says.
So for US Treasuries, it's
AAA,
365 days or less, repos at 30 days or less, but in the IMS and IPAs, the IMAs and IPS statements we have with Franklin Advisors, we're managing to a much tighter wham and wall.
Right. Yeah, we're not going to be getting in it. There's no way we can statutorily get in the CLOs or high yield right now. Overnight high yield, that would be like running a rowboat in a hurricane. Yeah.
I do note, Madam Chairman, that Commissioner Pope has a hand up. If Commissioner Wallace, anything else?
Commissioner Pope?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Part of this, the answer to this is to make sure that statute allows us to develop an operational reserve. And then we look at alternative investments, possibly only in the operational reserve. The statute right now says that we don't, that we have to maintain a 2% buffer, but really only to create the next waterfall effect, which is to pay operational costs. So I think that the ability to develop that operational reserve and have it grow as well is part of the answer to the decrease in interest rates if it goes below the 3% level. I looked all the way back to 1990, back when we were first considering this legislation, and the average was 3%. So we have definitely a risk of it falling below the 3%. Not nearly as much risk, even though it has over the past decade done that occasionally. But not as much as of a risk going below that 2% level. And so we really do need to make sure that we maintain adequate reserves when it is above the 2% level in order to weather the storms of those times. So that, again, maintaining an operational reserve, possibly allowing alternative investments within just the operational reserve portion. I think that may be one of the future answers for this.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if we could have Joe take a look at, the situation. Let's say you've got several billion there, and you don't know what the volatility is of the burn and churn on that. And from my perspective, that I'd like to see the optionality to go over 2% reserves if we get into a situation where we think we're growing fairly fast. We're not really confident that as far as how long those things are going to be out. And if you're burning and churning billions of dollars, you never have that token long enough to actually get your reserves up there. So to me, 2% reserves, I think, was more or less an arbitrary number and never really did the analysis about the actual business model. So I think when we get in, Joe can do some analysis there, some reasonable assumptions, and basically make sure the 2% is going to be functionally enough. And so there's some, it's just fine tuning. For right now, I think that we're in great shape. I don't think we're going to get that much volume as quick as we'd really want to actually see whether the 2% is not. But that's the nice thing about the people we got hired, Joe and your team. They can look at these scenarios and get us have a pretty darn good crystal ball.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Commissioner Meyer. Through the chair, just a quick response to that. I think Joe and Commissioner Pope both have hands up. I'll quickly say we've looked at all of that. One thing, just to reiterate from discussions in these forums, and Commissioner Wallace, I think this was your idea from a while back last year, was the 2% is a statutory floor. There's nothing precluding us from going higher than that when we perceive some of these liquidity events to happen or interest rates lowering. And as a result of that, we did put that in our reserves management rules as part of what we call that cascade. When the dollars come in as interest income, first they go with that buffer. The commission can vote to raise that buffer as it sees fit. Only after we achieve that buffer and have some kind of stabilization, then we can start returning money to the agency, which goes back to the general fund to repay our obligation. Then it goes back to the agency for any kind of continued operations. Then it goes to the school foundation fund. To your point, there are a couple of paradoxical mechanics at play. The faster we grow, the more difficult it is to hit that 2% buffer, right? And when our chairman, the governor, has spoken about things like gates, he's not referring to putting artificial thresholds on things, but just a general approach where we want to roll things out slowly and make sure we're achieving that milestone as we scale this thing up. I'll pause there. Madam Chairman, I'll turn it over to you, both Joe and Commissioner Pope have hands up.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
I believe I'll just let Commissioner Pope go first. His hand was up before.
Sure. I was just hoping you would pre-answer whatever his question is. So that's
Oh,
the
okay.
reason I went in that order. But go ahead, Commissioner Pope.
Okay, I'm not really sure this is a question, so I'm not sure it could be answered. But again, I want to refer back to the statute. The 2% floor only refers to the waterfall effect. We cannot pay operational costs until we reach that 2% floor. That's the only thing. We are not required to have a 2% floor unless we want to actually pay people, which we absolutely want to do. But that's that is a significant consideration. Also, the statute does not indicate whether that's an overall floor or a first in, first out floor, which means the first dollar that we have in inventory, if that has to have the 2% floor, and then as in successive time, each additional dollar then has to accrue it at 2% floor, which gives us some flexibility on the later dollars that come in as far as time frame, while still exceeding the 2% floor on the earlier ones. So it is a matter of determination for the future how we deal with that 2% floor. But the big thing is that we have to maintain a buffer. I agree, we have to get to a point where we have a 3% floor or above, or however this commission decides. It is just not something that we that's entirely set in stone how that's dealt with right now. So that's my comment on this. Still, we have to maintain those floors. We have to have some sort of operational buffer as well, or operational reserves that we build up before then we move on to the next step of the cascade or waterfall that Director Apollo is discussing. But beyond that, I will turn it over to Mr. Saldana.
Thank you, Commissioner Pope. That's actually very good ideas. We'll look into that at the director's discretion. Just to put some color onto Commissioner Meyer's comments, we did look at the volatility associated with historical trends associated with USDT and USDC. That's how the Monte Carlo and linear regression models were put together. It's been some time since I looked at that volatility, but we did incorporate that in our scenario analysis, not the one you're currently looking at, but previous analysis that we had done. But I'm happy to share that at our next session if needed. I just have to refresh my memory. I believe we had a 12% standard deviation, and that was with USDT. I believe that was the one that depegged. And USDC had a tighter standard deviation, but I have to go back and look at it. I haven't looked at it in a while.
Madam Chairman, I'm happy to address any other questions. One thing I'll quickly note about this file, generally, Joe has put this together with multiple interlocking databases, APIs pulling for things. You see there's a permission error on my screen right now. So I will try to figure out a better way to share this with all of our commissioners and as well as the public. But, we're committed to getting this up because, like everything, we're always happy to have the public feedback. And this will be quite critical going forward. I think it's acknowledgement of how far we've come, that these are the conversations we're having about, shocks to interest rates and kind of, more granular discussions about what could or could not back a token in the future. It's really a testament to what we've been able to build, and now we're worrying about the little things, which is the correct place to be, for sure. But I just wanted to acknowledge that as well.
Any further questions, comments before we move into upcoming meetings and then public comment? Or did I skip next steps? Or did we sort of talk about next steps?
Next steps is launch the token and make it available to the public.
That's what I figured.
That's easy.
Great.
In terms of upcoming meetings and events, we have our next regular meeting on September 18th. Again, the goal is to have the token live and available to the public at that time. Going back to some of the commentary with Commissioner Naves, we do have Plan B and Plan C, but we are trying to stay the course, and hopefully we'll net out well later next week with everything, which would be about a week ahead of the deadline we've provided. If we are able to achieve that, again, we'll probably invite a number of the partners that we've announced, including Kraken, Solana, Avalanche, and Rain, to that discussion to present how we can have people getting on the exchanges and purchasing Frontier stable tokens, as well as using the Rain card anywhere that you could use a Visa card or Apple Pay or Google Pay. The Select Committee on Blockchain, Financial Technology, and Digital Innovation Technology meets September 22nd and 23rd at the University of Wyoming. I'm going back and forth with them on a couple of amendments to token taxonomy, again, to bring some of the wording and definitions that were brought onto the books in state statute far back as 2018, because Wyoming was such a pioneer. Some of it sticks, some of it has not been adopted by the industry, and there's kind of a rebaselining effort there, as well as a few amendments to the Stable Token Act itself in regards to things we've talked about along the way, like our ability to take donations and how that would work, because there's some specificity required in there. And then the October regular meeting would be on a Tuesday, October 21st. We moved that because the week preceding, we have the Wyoming Global Technology Summit in Jackson. With that, Madam Chairman, I would defer to you on public comment. I will quickly note that duration will be limited to 3 minutes per speaking party or one question from an online participant. Speakers will be asked to provide their first name, last name, and affiliation for the public record per Wyoming Statute 16-4-403 subsection B. Decorum will be governed by the rules and standards of Management Council Policy 18-03 and Wyoming Statute 16-4-406.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move into public comment. I'm going to start with anybody in the room first. Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and ask for public comment online. And Steph, are you managing that? Okay, go ahead. And if you could just, if you're able to speak, make sure you identify yourself and then go ahead and give your public comment.
Hello, I'm Jan Hansen, and thank you for the public comment that we can make. Okay, so can you hear me okay, everyone?
I can, yeah, I think we can hear you quite well. Thank you.
Wonderful, good. Okay, well, listen, I have made public comment or through public venues before. And I, first of all, I want to say that I am not in support whatsoever of our state doing a stable token with public money. And you've maybe heard me say this or read it from me before, that I feel as if the use of public money for venture capital, risky ones as such, as demonstrated by your last discussions on not even knowing how to handle the interest rate risk of this stable token, and how the state of Wyoming is going to pay for the losses that could honestly be had by anything as high risk as this. I would like that is a question. How is and who is going to pay for the losses that are experienced by Wyoming? Are there projections for that in your projections? And one more thing, I was not able to find any of this information online. So I'm not sure, you know, Director Apollo has said that this stuff would be available today, and I was fine with that, except that I don't see any agenda, meeting minutes, or on your new site. And I realize you had a transition, but no one responded to me, even getting me that information before this meeting, which left me at a little bit of a disadvantage. But so 2 questions. How is the state of Wyoming going to pay for the losses? What bucket are you going to be dipping into in order to pay for the losses that are a possibility, great possibility? And then also, where are all of the public documents that I was told would be available? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanson. I'm going to let Director Apollo maybe talk about the availability of the documents real quick so we can get that cleared up, because we definitely want those available.
Sure. So through the chair and Ms. Hanson, thank you for the comment. As we demonstrated earlier in this conversation, at stabletoken.wyo.gov, if you go to resources, there should be a drop-down for meeting materials, and these materials are there. We noticed that, we pointed that out earlier during this conversation. Saying that I do recognize that you've been paying attention to this for quite a bit of time. So what you might have to do is just clear your cache or clear your cookies and refresh the page, and everything should be there. I will note that there are now tabs for not only, so you should be able to see everything by meeting, you should also be able to see, as we showed earlier, and I don't know if you were on the full call either, but there should be tabs for agendas, recordings, and if you're looking for materials by type, you should be able to find that quite easily. If you're looking for materials by meeting, that should all be there as well. If there is not, please do let me know. I will make sure that is there, and I can send you anything directly if you need to. I will note, one of the things we called out earlier is materials pertaining to the blockchain selection exercise. Some of those in their kind of summarized format will need to migrate over, as well as probably some of the legacy documents around the procurement process. Those are still available on the old website on Notion. We didn't shut that down until we have everything tight and locked down on our side. I'm also happy to take the first question about the losses, which is, it's important to note that in statute, Wyoming does not back the Wyoming stable token with the full faith and credit of the state, which means if there was to be some loss on the notional amount of tokens, so again, if for whatever reason we have a buffer, we burn through a buffer, if we need to start removing money from the trust account, essentially we would depeg off from $1. Again, we've got controls and mitigants in place to prevent that from happening, but that would not, the state is not responsible for the repayment of those funds because we don't back it with the full faith and credit of the state. That was quite an intentional maneuver by the legislature to make sure that Wyoming taxpayers were never on the hook for any kind of depegging event or liquidity crunch. In that case, the way the statute works is you'd be able to redeem a Wyoming stable token for less than $1. But that is just from a pure mechanical perspective, that is how that works. And Commissioner Meyer, I think you maybe wanted to add a few words to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
And what you can do actually is that if you a lot of this is forecastable as far as the costs associated with minting the token and burning the token, and then whether or not you reissue, you don't have to sell anything at a loss. So from the perspective of, you keep your eye on the ball, you might slide downhill, but you never get to the bottom, if that makes sense to you. And it's just a matter of math. And so it's one of those situations where, you don't, if like in the cattle industry, you don't have to buy and sell a calf at a loss if you know that you're going to buy or sell. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily lock in a future price at a loss, and you can figure out what the future prices of these things are going to be and the cost is going to be. So and with the 2% buffer, that limits perhaps the speed in which you can grow. And that's all it does. And so, but you have to make sure that you don't overgrow, or you put yourself at risk. And those are just mathematical relationships that We've got some great people in the commission and our chief financial officer. And so I'm comfortable that we're not going to get over our skis.
Yeah, and if I could just add one more thing, because Jan, hearing your comment now, I realize how some of the conversation leading up to your question may have sounded about us not being sure of how things would work. I want to be specific that we're talking about particular quirks of legislation that we have to abide by. If we talk about mechanics, right, if we say, one of the things that Commissioner Wallace brought up was negative interest rates. Well, we would never hold debt with a accompanied negative interest rate to it. We would just migrate everything to cash and be one-to-one backed, right? So it's not that we don't know how we would mitigate against these. We want to make sure that the protective barrier that we're setting up is firmly established and continues to be, even if prevailing rates do change with the basket of interest-bearing securities we are able to avail ourselves of in that basket of permitted investments.
And I think it's really important to know that we don't do really risky stuff. And some of these other stable tokens, when they first got them, they were trying to make as much money on a for-profit basis as they could. When the market moved against them, the value of their stable tokens were in the 60s and 70%. And so that's the way that it's structured in the statute. That just isn't going to happen. So as far as a venture, I think this is it's more not so much as a venture, because you can forecast through the statute and through what we've done that the outcome is not risky like a venture capital play.
And Mrs. Hanson, I did confirm that all the materials are out there on that new website, but again, we're all finding it sort of in new places with the rollout. So as the director said, if you have any trouble finding that, reach out and we can send a direct link or something like that.
Thank you.
As always, thank you for being here and keeping your eye on us. We appreciate it. Okay, any other public comment from online? Okay. With that, I will close public comment. Anything else for the good of the order from the commission? Anything from our commissioners online?
Not for me.
All right, well, thanks for being here, everyone. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.